Greetings all, and welcome to the 45th episode of TM Technical Movement. For today, we'll be looking at the Spike Cannon, Tri-Attack, Hyper Fang and Super Fang attacks, and the Sharpen, Lovely Kiss, Conversion, Conversion 2, Sketch, and Transform techniques. Much as the name suggests, the Spike Cannon attack involves forcefully firing sharp spines at an opponent in an attempt to pierce flesh and breach armor. Instead of relying on an actual component of their body that is vulnerable to attack to inflict damage, Pokémon with the ability to use the Spike Cannon attack use portions of their own hardened skin or shell as lethal projectiles to attack from afar. This is usually done by taking large quantities of air or water and then using them to create highly pressurized zones within the exterior portions of the user's shell or skin. When the pressure proves to be too great to contain, the areas immediately nearby are forced outward to relieve the pressure, in turn launching them as lethal projectiles. Because the projectiles generally consist of pieces of skin or shell that are exceptionally hard, destroying the projectiles in mid-flight is often difficult if not impossible. Moreover, discharged sections of skin or shell can usually be regrown almost instantly after being fired, allowing a single Pokémon to strike 2 to 5 times with every single Spike Cannon attack volley. What actually makes the Spike Cannon attack deadly, however, is the fact that it is normally impossible to dodge. It just so happens that the projectiles are launched so fast that even extremely agile Pokémon have difficulty dodging them without getting hit at least a few times. In combination with Pokémon like Cloyster that can naturally possess the Skill Link ability, this can make the move an unstoppable weapon of destruction capable of picking off most opponents long before they can even get close to the cost of very little stamina, and with the benefits of items such as King's Rocks. It is lastly noted that because the attack actually strikes multiple times in a short period of time, it can be used to override the effects of the Sturdy ability and items like the Focus Sash or Focus Band, as well as amplify the effects of the Weak Armor ability. Since the Spike Cannon attack involves firing multiple projectiles to deal damage, destroying said projectiles is the only way to directly counter the attack, otherwise the attack is almost impossible to dodge. Although the Spike Cannon attack is capable of taking advantage of abilities like Sturdy and Weak Armor, as well as items like Focus Sashes and Focus Bands, armor of almost any quality can also easily repel the damage done by each individual strike, making it difficult to make full use of the attack unless the opponent is unarmored. Even so, the damaging capabilities of the Spike Cannon attack on the battlefield are more than enough to make it a deadly weapon in a defensive battle. Extreme caution and sturdy defenses are therefore highly recommended for taking the brunt of the blows until a useful counterattack can be made. As the name may also suggest, the Tri-Attack involves striking with a triangular blast of energy formed from the unity of 3 elemental energy beams. The Tri-Attack is among the least understood of attacks, and ranks alongside the metronome technique in strangeness because of those who actually have the capacity to utilize it. This population is effectively divided into 2 groups: Pokémon that consist of or otherwise strictly evolve into Pokémon consisting of a formation of triplets, or cybernetic creatures like Genesect and the members of the Porygon and Type No families. It is thought that the former group is able to learn the move because of their reliance on 3 different minds to work in battle, while the latter is able to do so as a result of being made from modern technology, but the real reason behind either is still a bit of a mystery. Regardless though, the actual mechanics of the Tri-Attack are at least understood. The Tri-Attack, as said before, is a triangle-shaped energy beam that deals a decent amount of special damage for a considerable amount of stamina. What makes the Tri-Attack unique, however, is that it is initially formed from 3 different energy beams with elemental assignments of electric, fire, and ice, generated as a result of artificial processes within the user's body. In practice, this grants the attack the unique property of being able to paralyze, burn, or even freeze an opponent 20% of the time, with each status condition having about a 6.67% chance of occurring. It might be relatively impossible to tell what it will inflict on the opponent, if anything at all, but for trainers that are willing to risk it, the Tri-Attack can certainly help confuse the opposition by inflicting damage and status conditions that would otherwise be inaccessible to the user. It is for this reason that Silph decided to release the move as TM49 within its first generation line of TMs, but complaints over the unfairness of the move eventually led to be discontinued afterwards, though it was eventually brought back as TR19 in the first line of TRs before being discontinued once more. Due to its reliance on 3 separate energy beams to inflict damage, there is no way to directly counter or dodge the Tri-Attack. Strong armor in general can help reduce negate the damage dealt by the attack, however, but weaker armor is unlikely to perform as well without sustaining critical damage or failing altogether. The Tri-Attack is not a common enough move to be of much concern in most battles, but the fact that it can deal decent amounts of damage as well as inflict a possible status condition can nonetheless make it a considerable threat that strong defenses can at least partially rectify in battle. Once more, as its name may also suggest, the Hyper Fang attack involves crunching down on an opponent with hard sharp incisors in order to inflict intense physical trauma. The Hyper Fang attack could effectively be seen as a slight variation of the crunch attack. Instead of biting down with a full jaw of sharp teeth, the Hyper Fang attack utilizes the front incisors only to deal damage. Interestingly enough, this removes the need for anti-positive energy in the attack, so the move is allowed to keep a normal type assignment without suffering a drop in damage capacity. Unfortunately, the attack is not forceful enough to possibly lower the opponent's defenses with every blow. On the upside though, because the force delivered in the attack is centered within a very small portion of the user's mouth, it does have significant stopping power and can even cause the opponent to flinch about 10% of the time, though this robs the move of its ability to be affected by items like King's Rocks. Aside from this however, there is very little that can be said about the Hyper Fang attack. The move, along with the Super Fang attack, seems to be limited to Pokemon closely related to rodents that possess relatively large front incisors in comparison to the rest of their teeth, in turn meaning that the move is perfect for Pokemon that habitually whittle down their teeth in order to keep them short. The attack is surprisingly painful even though it's nothing more than an exaggerated bite, and even though the move is difficult to pull off effectively against armored opponents, it is nonetheless feared by many Pokemon because of the sheer amount of damage it can do despite the fact that its user might be nothing more than a weakling. Since an opponent needs to utilize its front incisors to execute a Hyper Fang attack, striking otherwise damaging the mouth and head cannot reduce or negate the damage dealt by this attack. If this is not an option however, fairly agile Pokemon can still dodge the attack in close quarters. Strong armor in general can outproduce or negate the damage dealt by this attack, but weaker armor is unlikely to perform as well without sustaining critical damage or failing altogether. The chances of seeing a Hyper Fang attack in professional combat are fairly small, but if it is available to the opposition, it is highly advised that evasive tactics, in conjunction with strong defenses, be utilized in order to prevent any chance of the attack inflicting considerable damage. Similar to the previous entry, the Super Fang attack also involves crunching down on an opponent with hard, sharp incisors in order to inflict intense physical trauma. The Super Fang attack could effectively be seen as a slight variation of the crunch attack, much like the Hyper Fang attack. Instead of biting down with a full jaw of sharp teeth, the Super Fang attack utilizes the front incisors only to deal damage. This also removes the need for anti-positive energy in the attack, so the move is also allowed to keep a normal type assignment without suffering a drop in damage capacity. Unfortunately, the attack is not forceful enough to possibly lower the opponent's defenses with every blow, so it lacks the ability to make armored opponents less frightening to all targets. What it can do, however, is simply amazing. Instead of relying on sheer force to deal damage, the Super Fang attack is designed to focus a tremendous amount of force directly onto pressure points near the opponent's most vulnerable spots. In practice, this has the effect of heavily debilitating the opponent and halving their current HP total without any regards to stats or experience differences. While this is the attack's only true defining trait, aside from being unaffected by items like King's Rocks, the fact that it can perform this exact function against all types of armored and unarmored opponents equally makes it a devastating weapon in all types of battle situations, particularly at the very beginning of a battle. The move, along with the Hyper Fang attack, seems to be limited to Pokemon closely related to rodents that possess relatively large front incisors in comparison to the rest of their teeth, in turn meaning that the move is perfect for Pokemon that habitually whittle their teeth down in order to keep them short. This means that the attack is unlikely to see a lot of use against powerful opponents in professional battles, but for those willing to gamble on it, the Super Fang attack can be a truly devastating force in the right situations, making Silphco's decision to make the move TM183 for the 9th generation line of TMs more than understandable. While damaging the teeth or fangs needed to utilize the Super Fang attack could possibly help to negate the attack's effects, if the move is executed properly at all, the resulting damage will be impossible to reduce. Thankfully, moderately agile Pokemon should still be able to dodge the attack in close quarters. As you might have guessed as well, armor will do little to help reduce any damage delivered by the attack, regardless of its durability. The chances of seeing a Super Fang attack in professional combat are fairly small, but if it is available to the opposition, it is highly advised that evasive tactics be followed in order to prevent any chance of the attack inflicting potentially massive damage. In effect, the Sharpen technique involves either reducing one's polygon count temporarily or sharpening one's edges in an effort to increase the amount of physical damage dealt. The Sharpen technique is limited to Porygon, Cryogonal, Carbink, Diancie, and the members of the Bergmite family, as a result of their unique anatomy and composition. In the case of Porygon, their programming is limited enough that they can effectively reduce their polygon count without affecting their operating speed at the same time, in turn increasing the sharpness of the edges on their body. In the case of Cryogonal and the members of the Bergmite family, they can effectively sharpen the edges of their body simply by melting and refreezing their form to create sharper edges. The effect is similar to what is seen in the crystals embedded within Carbink and Diancie. Regardless, the overall effect is the same. The Sharpen technique increases the user's attack stat when executed successfully, the sharp edges of the frame being able to deal more damage through physical blows in turn. The usefulness of the technique among those able to learn it might be limited, but if a strong physical blow is needed to surprise the opposition, the Sharpen technique can certainly provide a bit of needed aid. Attacks and techniques to raise a Pokemon's defense stat or lower an opponent's attack stat are highly recommended for dealing with the Sharpen technique. Considered to be the signature technique of Jinx, the Lovely Kiss technique involves forcing a neurotoxin-infused kiss on an opponent in an attempt to put them to sleep. Unlike the simple Sweet Kiss technique, the Lovely Kiss technique is a forceful move that only Jinx has the necessary power to pull off in battle. The poison generated by the user on the lips and used in a Lovely Kiss is far more potent than that used in a Sweet Kiss, so its effects on the opponent's neurological functions are much more extreme. So extreme, in fact, that it effectively renders them unconscious and puts them to sleep. Unfortunately, the toxin in this concentrated form also has a distinctive smell to it that is easily detected by other creatures, so planting a kiss on them is far more difficult than normal. As such, Jinx take little chance and rush straight at the opposition, sporting a scary face, hoping to scare them into temporary incapacitation. While the target is stunned, Jinx will then quickly grab a hold of it and forcefully plant that lovely kiss straight on its face, allowing the toxins to seep into every soft piece of exposed flesh. The move does not work against all types of opponents, and it's not guaranteed to deliver the right amount of poison every single time, but the fact that it instantly puts an opponent to sleep when it works can more than make it a devastating technique to use in close quarters. Because a kiss is required for this technique to work, striking the attacker, otherwise deflecting this kiss, can help negate its effectiveness. Otherwise, relatively agile Pokémon, as well as most items and abilities that either cure or prevent sleep, are highly recommended for countering the Lovely Kiss technique. Considered to be one of the signature techniques of the Porygon family, the conversion technique effectively involves the user temporarily altering its own programming to change its type to that of one of its moves. Because they are built completely out of computer code, the members of the Porygon family are able to alter their own mechanical functions for short amounts of time by reformatting their special abilities to something that will assist them in battle. The conversion technique does this by changing the type of the user so as to match the type of the move it knows first and best among all of its available options. In addition to providing them a completely new selection of type advantages and disadvantages, this allows the user to utilize one of its moves to an extent otherwise inaccessible to them. Unfortunately, the limited programming alteration involved in the technique cannot be easily controlled, so there is no real way to change its type to something that matches any of its other moves in battle. Even so, it can more than prove to be a great way to attack an opponent who is otherwise too tough to defeat with a super effective move at the user's disposal or in its normal state. Aside from taking advantage of the opponent's type change, there is no way to directly counter the effects of the conversion technique. Also considered to be one of the signature techniques of the Porygon family, the Conversion 2 technique effectively involves the user temporarily altering its own programming to change its type to a type that is either resistant or immune to the type of move used last by an opponent. As noted in the previous entry, because they are built completely out of computer code, the members of the Porygon family are able to alter their own mechanical functions for short amounts of time by reformatting their special abilities to something that will assist them in battle. The Conversion 2 technique does this by changing the type of the user so as to become something resistant or immune to the type of move last used by an opponent. In addition to providing them a completely new selection of type advantages and disadvantages, this can allow the user to take advantage of the opponent's own attacks to become resistant or even immune to the most powerful forms of offense. While this move doesn't necessarily grant Porygon or its evolutions any significant attack advantages, it can still make it very difficult for the opposition to counter if they don't have an attack that is super effective against the newly applied type, and start making it a great way of disrupting any strategies that focus on type advantages to work. Aside from taking advantage of the opponent's type change, there is no way to directly counter the effects of the Conversion 2 technique. Considered to be the signature technique of Smeargle, the Sketch technique essentially involves using all the stamina and mental power the user can muster to permanently copy the move last used by an opponent. Much as with the Mimic technique, the Sketch technique's true functions are a relative mystery, but are nonetheless beyond drastic. Although Smeargle are unable to normally learn any sort of move to defend themselves with, they are able to apply the memory skills they have obtained through their interaction with art to mentally copy the moves used by an opponent. By focusing intently on the actions of their opponent and putting the memory centers into overdrive, Smeargle can instantly memorize the functions, execution, and attributes of a move so well that they become able to physically use it, with only a small handful of exceptions. The cost behind this extraordinary ability is often blamed on their surprisingly flexible anatomy, but the true operation of the Sketch technique is unknown and apparently so unique and/or difficult to use that only Smeargle are ever able to utilize it. The move is also known for requiring more stamina to operate than almost any other known move, so much so in fact that it practically drains Smeargle of all of their natural abilities and prevents them from using the move again for a while. Even so, the move is an invaluable tool for the species and can more often than not prove to be an interesting gimmick to play on unsuspecting opponents in battle. Due to its unique properties, there is no way to directly counter the effects of the Sketch technique. Much as the name suggests, the transform technique involves temporarily altering one's own cellular structure in order to match that of the opposition. The two species of Pokemon able to learn the transform technique, Ditto and Mew, are only able to do so because their genetics are highly unstable and their cellular state is readily malleable into a different form, their cells acting like stem cells as a default state to make the most of this unique attribute. Essentially, the move works by allowing the user to quickly analyze the physical composition of their opponent, whether this is done via psychic power or some other force is still unknown, and then reconstruct its own biological form and cellular matter to perfectly match the makeup and capabilities of their opponent. In doing so, these Pokemon instantly copy their opponent's appearances, type, moves, most of their stats, and any stat or ability alterations that have occurred to them. What this move cannot do, however, is copy status afflictions, as they are not a natural component of the opponent's current state, and their current HP, because the user of the move is still dependent upon his own personal health to compete in battle. In addition, the user of this move cannot perfectly copy all of the opponent's moves, because the transform technique itself requires a large amount of stamina to use. In short, any move copied has its stamina requirement raised to extremely high levels, in turn limiting the actions of the transform Pokemon. Even so, these attributes make the transform technique a wicked and potentially battle-ending move that can literally take whatever the opponent has on its side and use it against them without question. It may be very limited to only 2 Pokemon, but for them, it's a valuable tool that can make both hiding and survival in battle a viable option. Due to its unique attributes, there is no way to directly counter the effects of the transform technique except by using another Pokemon with the same technique, in which case neither side will be able to utilize the move correctly. That's it for now, but look forward to the next set of moves here on TM Technical Movement. Thank you all for watching this video. It is a great pleasure to share with you all the fruits of my research and all the positives it gives to understanding the wonderful creatures we call Pokemon and how their powers and behaviors function in their world. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more work like it, please give a like, comment, and or subscribe to the channel so you can get regular notifications on when new content is being uploaded. You can also find links to my DeviantArt page, Patreon, and Discord server in the description below. Please, join me on this road to seeing what the world of Pokemon has to share with us, and the many mysteries and wonders that keep us all coming back for more.